Have you ever felt a place so heavy with history and fear that it makes your skin crawl, even from miles away? Imagine standing on islands where thousands have lived, suffered, or mysteriously disappeared, and where the air itself seems to whisper secrets no one dares to speak aloud. These islands are not just abandoned, they carry the echoes of real lives, real tragedies, and stories so chilling that even the bravest souls hesitate to set foot here. Today, I'm taking you through 5 of the most haunted islands in the world, where fear isn't a legend, it's reality. If you want to explore more haunted places and hear real chilling stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our adventure. 1. Poveglia Island, Italy. The boat slowed down as we got closer to Poveglia Island, and the first thing I felt was silence. Not normal silence, but the kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. Even though Venice was not far away, it felt like we were moving into a completely different world. The island looked dark, broken, and forgotten. Old buildings stood there with empty windows, like they were watching us arrive. As I stepped onto the island, the ground felt uneven under my feet. Grass had grown over old stone paths, and parts of the buildings were collapsing. I knew the history before coming here, and that made every step harder. This island was once used to isolate people during the plague. Thousands were brought here to die, burned in mass graves when they showed symptoms. Standing there, it was impossible not to think about the fear those people must have felt, knowing they would never leave. I walked deeper into the island and reached the remains of the old hospital. The walls were cracked, and the paint was peeling, but the structure was still standing. This place later became a mental hospital, and that part of the story always disturbed me the most. According to historical records, doctors carried out extreme experiments here, and many patients suffered greatly. Some locals even say the head doctor went mad himself and jumped from the bell tower. Whether that part is legend or not, the suffering inside these walls was real. Inside one of the rooms, I paused. The air felt colder, and there was a strange smell of damp stone and decay. I remember thinking how many people must have cried in that exact spot. My mind kept imagining footsteps behind me, even though I knew I was alone. It wasn't fear of ghosts, but the weight of human pain that made my chest feel tight. As I moved toward the center of the island, I noticed pieces of blackened earth. Historians say the soil here is mixed with ash from cremated bodies. That thought stayed with me. Every step felt like walking over a grave. I caught myself lowering my voice, almost out of respect, even though no one was around to hear me. When it was time to leave, I felt relief but also a strange sadness. Poveglia Island is not just haunted because of stories. It feels haunted because real people lived, suffered, and died here. As the boat pulled away, I looked back once more. The island slowly disappeared into the fog, but the feeling it left with me stayed long after. It's a place that reminds you how dark human history can be, and that darkness is very real. 2. Hashima Island, Gunkanjima, Japan. The first time I saw Hashima Island from the boat, I couldn't believe it was real. It looked like a giant fortress rising straight out of the sea, gray and jagged, surrounded by dark water that reflected the clouds above. The closer we got, the more I realized how abandoned it really was. There were no signs of life, no birds, nothing. Just concrete ruins and the sound of waves crashing against the steel walls. A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I couldn't stop staring. Stepping onto the island felt unreal. The air was heavy with salt, but also with something else. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Every step I took on the cracked concrete felt loud, echoing across empty streets and hollow buildings. I remembered reading about how this place was once called Gunkanjima, the battleship island, and how coal miners lived here with their families. It was crowded, loud, full of life, and now, silence. Pure, suffocating silence. I imagined the children running, the voices of miners shouting, and it made the emptiness hit harder. I walked through one of the old apartment blocks. The walls were blackened, windows shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. I could feel the energy of hundreds of people who had once lived here. According to history, during the war, forced laborers were brought to the island. Men and women from Korea and China worked in the mines under horrible conditions. They were starved, overworked, and beaten. Standing in those dark halls, I could almost hear faint cries, or maybe it was my imagination. My chest tightened. How could so much suffering exist in one small island? As I climbed one of the broken staircases, I could see the ocean surrounding the island, endless and gray. The wind was harsh, whipping through the empty corridors, and I had to hold my balance. I thought about the families who once watched the sea from these apartments, unaware of what the future held. Many workers never returned home. Some died in the mines, some in the harsh weather, and some simply disappeared, swallowed by the concrete labyrinth they called home. Walking further, I came across a collapsed wall. Rusted metal beams jutted out like broken bones. I ran my fingers over them and felt the cold bite of history. Every corner, every shadow here told a story of hardship and survival. I realized that what makes this island haunted isn't ghosts or myths, it's the real suffering that happened here, etched into every stone and every broken window. When it was time to leave, I turned back for a last look. Hashima looked like a ghost frozen in time, and I felt a strange mix of fear and sadness. This place was alive once, full of hope and life, and now it was only memories and echoes. I left with a heavy heart, knowing that the story of Hashima is real, raw, and unforgettable. Even now, thinking about it makes my stomach twist. It's not just an abandoned island. It's a monument to human struggle, and that truth is haunting in a way no legend ever could be. 3 Isla de las Muñecas, Island of the Dolls, Mexico. I remember the first time I set foot on Isla de las Muñecas, the island of the dolls in Mexico. From the boat, it looked strange, almost unreal. Trees hung low over the water, and from afar, I could see what looked like tiny, colorful shapes swaying in the wind. At first, I thought they were flags or cloth, but as we got closer, I realized they were dolls, hundreds, maybe thousands, hanging from every branch, nailed to every post, staring at the water with glassy eyes. My stomach twisted, and a shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't sure if I was scared or fascinated. Stepping onto the island, I immediately felt the weight of silence, but it wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, like the island was holding secrets. The dolls' hair and clothes had faded over the years, and many had broken limbs, missing eyes, or cracked faces. Some seemed to smile faintly, others stared blankly. Walking between them, it felt like hundreds of invisible eyes were following me. I remembered reading about Don Julian Santana, the man who lived here and hung dolls to honor a girl who drowned near the island. Over time, he became obsessed, believing the dolls could absorb the spirits around the island. Knowing this made every step I took feel alive with history and mystery. I moved carefully through the paths, stepping over roots and broken doll limbs. My hands brushed against the cracked plastic faces, and it sent chills through me. I imagined what it must have been like to live here, with hundreds of dolls staring at you every day. Locals say Don Julian spoke to the dolls as if they were people, sometimes yelling at them, sometimes whispering apologies. I could almost hear his voice echoing through the trees, mixing with the faint sound of the water hitting the shore. As I explored further, I found dolls tied together, some floating in small pools, some hanging over the edges of wooden platforms. The smell of damp wood and decay was strong, and it made me feel both uneasy and alert. I couldn't stop thinking about the energy this place had absorbed over the years, from the drowning girl, from Julian's obsession, and from every storm that tore through the island. Every corner seemed to hold a story, every cracked doll a witness to a lifetime of sorrow and care. When I finally climbed back to the dock, I couldn't look at the dolls the same way again. Isla de las Muñecas isn't just creepy for fun, it's haunted by real human grief, devotion, and tragedy. Walking away, I felt the eyes of the dolls on my back, and even now, thinking about that day makes my skin crawl. The island is a reminder that sometimes, the most haunting places aren't just about ghosts, they're about the lives that touch them and the stories that refuse to fade away. 4. North Brother Island, New York, USA. I still remember the first time I approached North Brother Island in New York. From the ferry, it looked small, almost innocent, surrounded by the calm Hudson River, but something about it felt wrong. The island was covered in overgrown trees and dark shadows, and I could barely make out the ruins of old buildings peeking through the foliage. Even from a distance, I felt a chill that ran all the way down my spine. It wasn't just the isolation. It was the history embedded in every corner of this place. Stepping onto the island, I immediately noticed how quiet it was. Not just regular quiet, but a kind of silence that made you feel exposed, like the island itself was watching you. I wandered past crumbling walls and broken paths, imagining the thousands of patients who were once confined here. North Brother Island was home to Riverside Hospital, used to quarantine people with infectious diseases like smallpox and typhoid. The thought of entire families brought here, separated from the world, and never returning, made my stomach twist. You could almost feel the fear that must have filled this place decades ago. I moved through the ruins of the hospital, my footsteps echoing across empty halls. Some rooms still had peeling paint and rusted metal beds. I paused and pictured the infamous Typhoid Mary, who spent years isolated here. It was hard not to imagine her fear, her loneliness, staring out at the same river I was looking at now. Every corner seemed heavy with unspoken stories, stories of people who died alone, far from home, and stories of doctors who tried to control a disease they barely understood. As I walked further, I noticed the overgrown courtyard, the cracked concrete, and the remnants of brick buildings. I could feel the weight of so many lives, suffering, pain, hope, despair, all lingering in the air. It wasn't ghosts that made the place haunting, it was the real human history, the harsh reality of isolation, illness, and death that made it almost unbearable to stand there for too long. I felt an urge to whisper, almost out of respect, though no one was around. When it was time to leave, I turned back for one last look. North Brother Island disappeared slowly into the horizon as the ferry moved away, but the heaviness of the place stayed with me. It wasn't just abandoned buildings or rumors of hauntings, it was real lives, real suffering, and real fear frozen in time. Even now, thinking about that island makes my heart race and my thoughts return to those who once called it home. This wasn't just an abandoned island. It was a living memory of human hardship, and that truth is far more haunting than any ghost story. 5. Eilean Mor, Flannan Isles, Scotland. The first time I laid eyes on Eilean Mor, one of the Flannan Isles in Scotland, I felt a strange mix of awe and unease. From the boat, the island looked small, almost fragile, surrounded by endless waves that crashed against jagged cliffs. The wind was sharp, carrying the salty scent of the sea, and I could see the lighthouse standing tall, stubborn against the horizon. Something about the isolation of this place made my heart beat faster, like it was warning me that this wasn't an ordinary visit. When I stepped onto the island, the ground was uneven, slippery with wet stones, and I had to focus on every step. The lighthouse loomed closer, and I could feel the weight of its history pressing on me. In 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers mysteriously vanished without a trace. The story haunted me even before I arrived, but being here made it real. I imagined them performing their daily tasks, maintaining the lights in the stormy weather, and then one day, just disappearing. What could have happened? The thought made my stomach tighten. Walking along the narrow paths, I saw small ruins of old buildings, stones covered with moss, and scattered tools that might have once belonged to the keepers. I tried to picture their lives, how lonely it must have been, the sound of waves hitting the cliffs day and night, the cold wind cutting through every corner. I felt a strange empathy, a connection to people I never met but whose absence still lingered here. Every creaking board and hollow stone seemed to whisper fragments of their story, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the island itself was holding secrets. As I reached the edge of the cliffs, looking out at the endless sea, I thought about the search parties, the reports, and the unanswered questions that followed their disappearance. No evidence was ever found, no explanation, just the island standing silently, guarding its mystery. I imagined the fear the men must have felt in their final moments, if they realized danger was approaching. My hands shook slightly as the wind gusted, and I realized the island doesn't just tell a story, it makes you feel it, deeply and personally. When it was time to leave, I looked back at Eileen Moore one last time. The lighthouse seemed smaller now, but the weight of history stayed with me. This place is not haunted by ghosts, but by the very real mystery of vanished lives, by the isolation and danger that once consumed the three men. Even now, thinking about that day makes my chest tighten. The island holds a story that will never be fully known, and that is what makes it so haunting. It is a place where the sea, the wind, and the rocks carry a truth that no words can fully capture, and for anyone who visits, the feeling lingers long after they leave.